What does courage look like when your cockpit is on fire and your radio has gone silent? For generations, air war movies have tried to capture that impossible heartbeat between bravery and fear. But some films go further, showing the mechanics of survival and the philosophy of flight itself. Today, we count down 15 air war classics real pilots recommend to rookies for lessons you will never forget. Number 15. The Blue Max, 1966. When the Blue Max took flight, it wasn't just another World War I drama. It was a dare to show the sky as a place of obsession and vanity. Starring George Peppard as a ruthless German pilot chasing the legendary Blue Max medal, the film became famous for its aerial realism. Director John Guillermin refused model shots. Real biplanes tangled over Irish fields, often flown by stuntmen who risked their lives for a few seconds of truth. The story follows Bruno Stachel, a common soldier who rises from mud to cockpit, believing the medal will prove his worth to the elite class. But his arrogance turns every mission into a duel not against the enemy, but against his own ambition. Some critics called it cold and mechanical. Veterans called it brutally honest. Behind the scenes, the production nearly collapsed. Peppard demanded dangerous stunts, and camera crews struggled with heavy rigs mounted on fragile planes. One aircraft was destroyed during filming, but no lives were lost. The result was aerial footage so authentic that real pilots later used it for maneuvers training. The Blue Max wasn't about heroism. It was about ego meeting altitude, and decades later, pilots still watch it not to dream of glory, but to remember how ambition can become its own fatal turbulence. Number 14. Battle of Britain, 1969. Battle of Britain was not a movie. It was an air fleet disguised as one. The production assembled one of the largest collections of flyable vintage warplanes ever captured on film. Over 100 aircraft filled the skies, recreating the desperate summer of 1940 when Britain stood alone against the Luftwaffe. Starring Michael Caine, Trevor Howard, and Laurence Olivier, the film's power came not from dialogue, but from the sound of Merlin engines roaring through the speakers. Director Guy Hamilton shot real aerial dogfights over Spanish and English coasts, creating dizzying sequences that later inspired George Lucas's space battles. The movie faced political storms. Spain's government supplied ex-Luftwaffe planes, but British veterans protested that the film's portrayal softened German pilots. Critics were divided, calling it both thrilling and detached. Yet for real pilots, it became a manual of endurance and strategy. Filming was chaos. Cloud cover changed daily, grounding aircraft and inflating costs. Pilots performing mock combat often came dangerously close to collisions. One near miss forced production to halt for a week. Hamilton insisted on authenticity, saying fake skies would betray history. The legacy of Battle of Britain is not box office glory, but technical achievement. Every frame is a salute to those who fought with altitude as their only armor. To rookies, it remains a lesson in discipline, timing, and the noise of courage. Number 13. 12 O'Clock High, 1949. Few films have ever captured the psychology of command like 12 O'Clock High. Starring Gregory Peck as General Frank Savage, it was praised by military schools for its raw honesty about leadership fatigue and the moral cost of war. Set during the early bombing campaigns over Nazi Europe, the film shows a squadron shattered by losses. Savage arrives to rebuild them not with sympathy but precision. He pushes the men past fear, teaching that survival depends on unity, not emotion. The result is a story less about flight and more about the invisible weight inside the cockpit. Audiences in post-war America found it too intense. No rousing music, no clear victory. Just exhaustion and silence after missions. Yet the U.S. Air Force adopted the film as a training aid, calling it essential viewing for officers. Behind the lens, director Henry King worked closely with real bomber crews. Many sequences were filmed with authentic B-17s, flown by veterans who had seen the same skies in combat. The aerial footage mixed wartime newsreels with new shots, creating eerie realism. Gregory Peck later admitted it was the hardest role of his career because he had to strip away heroism and play command as burden, not privilege. 12 O'Clock High remains a quiet giant of aviation cinema. For rookies, it's a warning that leadership is not about control, but about carrying every man who never came back. Number 12. The Right Stuff, 1983. The Right Stuff is not just about flight. It is about the moment when men dared to leave the sky behind and touch the void. Adapted from Tom Wolfe's book, this sweeping chronicle of test pilots and early astronauts turned the cold machinery of the space race into something human, raw, and reckless. Director Philip Kaufman built the film like a hymn to courage. It begins in the barren deserts of Edwards Air Force Base, where Chuck Yeager breaks the sound barrier, and ends in the sterile rooms of NASA, where pilots trade instinct for protocol. The cast, led by Ed Harris and Sam Shepard, portrayed the brotherhood between men who risked fiery death for nothing more than speed and pride. The production faced its own turbulence. Special effects crews developed innovative camera rigs to simulate hypersonic motion, while NASA declined cooperation, fearing the film's tone was too irreverent. Early test audiences were confused by the mix of humor and tragedy, but pilots loved it. Many said it finally captured the silence between heartbeats before takeoff. Despite modest box office results, The Right Stuff became a cult legend in aviation circles. It won 4 Academy Awards and remains part of U.S. Air Force Academy curricula. For rookies, it's a reminder that machines change, but courage doesn't. It's not about rockets or cockpits. It's about the burning need to go higher even when no one asks you to. Number 11. Memphis Belle, 1990. Memphis Belle arrived when war movies had turned glossy, but director Michael Caton-Jones revived the old spirit of sweat and noise. Based on the true story of a B-17 bomber crew completing their final mission over Germany in 1943, it honored camaraderie rather than combat. The film recreated the claustrophobia of a bomber's belly, where 10 men shared fear, oxygen, and hope. Starring Matthew Modine, Eric Stoltz, and Billy Zane, it mixed Hollywood energy with documentary realism. The story followed the final run over Bremen, a mission that would decide whether the crew lived to go home or vanish into smoke. The production used real B-17s restored and flown over English skies. Each takeoff was a ballet of danger. Engines overheated and mechanics worked through the night. During one scene, a propeller shattered on camera, but the pilot held control, saving the crew and footage. Some critics accused the film of patriotism. Others said it brought back the forgotten bravery of young crews. Actual veterans praised its accuracy, especially the tension of flak bursts echoing through the fuselage. Behind the romance and bravado, Memphis Belle hid a truth. Even the last mission never feels like the last. For rookie pilots, the film endures as a meditation on teamwork. You don't survive the sky alone. You survive because 10 hands tighten the same bolt, 10 hearts keep the same rhythm. The Belle still flies in museums, but its real legacy lives in the bond between those who climbed aboard, knowing one mistake could erase them all. Number 10. The Dam Busters, 1955. The Dam Busters is where invention met sacrifice. Telling the real story of Britain's Operation Chastise, it immortalized the engineers and pilots who destroyed German dams using a revolutionary bouncing bomb. Released just a decade after the war, it became a national symbol of courage, ingenuity, and loss. Director Michael Anderson shot with surgical precision, blending miniature effects with real Lancaster bombers. The mission sequences were choreographed like an orchestra, each maneuver timed to inches above the water. What viewers saw as spectacle, pilots recognized as pure skill. Behind the camera, chaos brewed. The Royal Air Force supervised every detail but refused to disclose classified methods, forcing Anderson to invent convincing replicas. The film's theme music became iconic, yet the story's hero, Wing Commander Guy Gibson, was already gone, killed before the movie premiered. That ghostly shadow made the film more haunting. Controversy followed. Some veterans accused the production of simplifying tragedy. Others claimed it glorified bombing, but aviators defended it as a study of discipline under pressure. The Dam Busters later inspired George Lucas's Death Star trench run almost shot for shot, proving its influence beyond aviation. For rookies, it teaches that courage is not bravado but calculation. Every flight is a math problem written in smoke and water, and sometimes victory feels less like triumph and more like quiet remembrance. Number 9. Top Gun, 1986. Top Gun was not just a movie, it was an adrenaline injection straight into the culture of aviation. When Tony Scott's cameras followed Tom Cruise in an F-14 Tomcat slicing through sunset skies, it changed how an entire generation viewed fighter pilots. The movie was part propaganda, part rock opera, and all spectacle. Its story of Maverick, the rebellious aviator chasing excellence through grief and ego, was simple but powerful. What audiences didn't know was that the U.S. Navy worked hand in hand with Paramount. Real pilots flew every maneuver, and most of the dialogue was rewritten to match authentic radio calls. The Navy even stationed camera operators on carriers where sea spray-coated lenses and film reels warped in heat. Behind the scenes, chaos brewed. Jets flew so close during dogfight filming that several pilots refused to continue. One stunt flyer, Art Scholl, died after losing control during a spin. His footage was never recovered. His death cast a permanent shadow on the film's success. When it hit theaters, Top Gun exploded. Recruitment in the Navy reportedly spiked by nearly 50%. Critics rolled their eyes, calling it flashy and shallow, but pilots respected the detail. The aerial choreography was so precise that flight schools later used scenes as motivational tools. Top Gun became myth. It reminded every young aviator that confidence can both save and destroy. For rookies, it remains a double-edged lesson. The sky rewards skill but punishes pride faster than any enemy missile. Number 8. The Hunters, 1958. Before Top Gun glamorized dogfights, the Hunters captured their despair. Set during the Korean War, it starred Robert Mitchum as a jet ace haunted by lost comrades and moral decay. Critics at the time called it strange, too introspective for an action film, but pilots recognized its truth. The movie's jet sequences were revolutionary. Real F-86 Sabres screamed across the Mojave Desert, doubling for the Korean front. Director Dick Powell insisted on live flight photography rather than models. The camera shook from shockwaves and pilots performed near-impossible passes just for a few usable frames. The story explored obsession and rivalry as two pilots competed for honor under impossible odds. There were no villains, only exhaustion. When the film premiered, some U.S. Air Force officials criticized its depiction of reckless flying, fearing it might discourage recruits. Powell ignored them. He said war should make you question courage, not crave it. Production was brutal. Heat melted equipment, and one aircraft barely made it back after fuel leaks. Mid-filming. The crew called it cursed, yet its final battle sequences remain some of the most realistic ever shot. The Hunters disappeared quietly but resurfaced decades later on restoration prints and streaming services. Modern pilots still mention it for its authenticity and melancholy tone. It's not a film about winning, it's about remembering what victory costs. Number 7. Aces High, 1976. Aces High was the anti-romance of flight. While most war films celebrated pilots as knights of the air, this British drama showed them as doomed young men burning through courage, faster than fuel. Based loosely on R.C. Sherriff's play, Journey's End, it stars Malcolm McDowell as a squadron leader trying to hold his sanity as friends die around him during World War I. Director Jack Gold filmed with chilling restraint. No sweeping music, just wind engines and silence after every fall. The production shot in Belgium using replica SE-5 biplanes and real aerial footage that looked too authentic for comfort. Some scenes were filmed so low that camera operators ducked instinctively as wings sliced past. Pilots consulted on flight patterns, ensuring historical accuracy down to bullet trajectories. Critics admired its realism, but general audiences found it too bleak. There were no victories, only funerals. The British Ministry of Defense reportedly objected to promotional material suggesting widespread trauma among WWI pilots, fearing damage to national pride. Over time, Aces High found redemption on late-night television and aviation festivals. Veteran flyers praised its honesty, calling it a rare film that tells the truth about courage, fatigue, and youth devoured by duty. For rookies, it's a sobering primer. The film teaches that bravery is not endless. It burns like oil, beautiful for a moment, then gone, leaving only smoke in the dawn. Number 6. Tora, 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 1970. Tora, Tora, Tora stands as one of the boldest joint productions in film history. A collaboration between American and Japanese filmmakers, it chronicled the attack on Pearl Harbor with chilling precision. The title used the Japanese code word for lightning strike, and the film lived up to that name by capturing chaos as it had never been filmed before. Unlike earlier war pictures, this one refused to pick heroes or villains. It told both sides with cold accuracy, revealing how intelligence errors, pride, and miscommunication turned December 7th, 1941 into a catastrophe. The American directors Richard Fleischer and Kinji Fukasaku from Japan split the film in half, showing mirror images of preparation and disaster. The production was massive. Real ships were refitted. Full-scale airfields were constructed. Stunt pilots flew vintage Japanese Zero replicas at terrifyingly low altitudes. One plane crashed during filming, nearly killing the crew. Still, they continued, driven by a strange reverence for the moment they were recreating. Audiences were divided. Some called it too factual, others too unemotional. But real pilots saw art in its control. The aerial sequences were studied for their accuracy in formation, flying, and timing. Japanese veterans even wept during early screenings, saying it finally showed their perspective without propaganda. Behind the scenes, tensions rose between both film units. Cultural clashes led to walkouts and reshoots. Yet the result was a balanced historical record. The film's lasting power comes from restraint. It never shouts. It observes. For rookie pilots, it remains an unflinching lesson that precision can be both weapon and salvation. The sky does not forgive errors, whether on the battlefield or behind the camera. Number 5. Flight of the Intruder, 1991. Flight of the Intruder took viewers deep into the cockpit of the A-6 bomber during the Vietnam War. It wasn't glossy or heroic, it was weary and mechanical, filled with night missions and moral uncertainty. Based on Stephen Kuntz's novel and starring Willem Dafoe and Danny Glover, it explored what happens when duty and doubt collide at 900 miles per hour. Director John Milius, known for his military precision, approached it like a combat journal. The movie follows pilot Jake Grafton, who grows disillusioned with political restrictions that dictate where he can strike. The result is rebellion, an unsanctioned bombing run that questions the purpose of every order ever given. Filming real aerial maneuvers over the South China Sea was perilous. Navy crews coordinated each flight with radar timing to avoid collisions. The sound department recorded actual A-6 engines to capture the heartbeat rhythm of combat runs. During one sequence, a malfunctioning flare ignited dangerously close to the crew, but Dafoe insisted on continuing the take. The movie struggled at release, overshadowed by Gulf War coverage. Critics dismissed it as old-fashioned, but among real aviators it gained quiet respect. They praised its honesty about fatigue, boredom, and guilt, emotions few war films dared show. Flight of the Intruder later found life on cable and became a favorite among flight instructors who used its scenes to discuss risk judgment and teamwork. It teaches rookies that even when politics cloud the mission, professionalism must stay clear. Courage is not defiance. It's the ability to question orders and still fly straight. Number 4. The Bridges at Toko-Ri, 1954. The Bridges at Toko-Ri is one of the most human air war films ever made. Adapted from James Michener's novel, it follows U.S. Navy pilots during the Korean War as they face impossible missions over icy valleys. William Holden stars as Lieutenant Brubaker, a lawyer-turned-aviator who begins to question why he fights a war far from home. From the first frame, the film hums with melancholy. It is not about glory, but about duty's quiet cost. The dogfights are real, photographed aboard carriers and against winter. Skies that look endlessly cold. Director Mark Robson used authentic Navy footage and coordinated directly with carrier crews to ensure realism. The result was both beautiful and terrifying. Planes vanish into clouds and reappear smoking over mountain ranges. Behind the scenes, production was grueling. The U.S. Navy allowed access to aircraft but demanded accuracy in tactics. Multiple near accidents occurred during catapult launches. One camera plane was nearly lost in turbulence but recovered seconds before impact. Critics praised the film's emotional maturity. It ended not with victory but with reflection. When Admiral Tarrant asks where brave men come from, it became one of the most quoted lines in aviation history. The Bridges at Toko-Ri received 2 Academy Awards, but its legacy runs deeper. It's screened at flight academies to this day. For rookies, it delivers a timeless truth. Courage isn't about wanting to fight. It's about rising into the wind even when your heart stays on the ground. Number 3. The Great Waldo Pepper, 1975. The Great Waldo Pepper soared onto screens like a dream and a eulogy all at once. Directed by George Roy Hill and starring Robert Redford, it told the story of a World War I pilot turned barnstormer chasing fame through the skies of post-war America. On the surface, it looked like adventure. Underneath it was a requiem for a dying breed of flyers. The movie opens with wide Midwestern skies where daredevils dance above crowds for nickels and applause. Redford's Waldo Pepper is one of them, obsessed with proving himself as great as the wartime legends he missed by inches. Every loop, every stunt is a prayer to immortality and a flirtation with death. Real aircraft were used for every sequence. No models, no tricks. The pilots flew without safety harnesses, relying only on balance and precision. One tragic scene, a mid-air wing walk gone wrong, was so real it made audiences gasp. The stuntman actually performed the fall from several hundred feet, attached only by hidden cables. Director Hill wanted authenticity, not illusion. That pursuit of realism nearly destroyed the production when crosswinds flipped one of the planes during filming. Miraculously, no one died. Critics at the time misunderstood it, calling it slow and nostalgic. But pilots knew what it was, the most honest portrayal of obsession with flight ever made. It captured that fleeting era when flying was pure art and risk was life's currency. The Great Waldo Pepper didn't glorify aviation, it mourned it. For rookies, it remains a sacred text, reminding them that freedom in the air is beautiful only because it is so easily lost. Every loop through the clouds is a brushstroke on the edge of eternity. Number 2. Wings, 1927. Before sound, before color, before fame itself, there was Wings, the first film ever to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. It was silent but deafening in its ambition. Directed by William Wellman himself, a World War I pilot, Wings captured aerial combat with real planes, real explosions, and real peril. The story followed 2 rival pilots, Jack and David, fighting for love and survival in the Great War. Simple melodrama, yes, but wrapped in visuals so astonishing that audiences believed they were seeing actual dogfights for the first time. Wellman mounted cameras on aircraft using lenses that had never before faced wind at such speeds. One pilot was knocked unconscious during a take, but the footage remained intact and ended up in the final cut. Production costs skyrocketed. The Army lent hundreds of men and planes, but demanded authenticity in return. Some extras fainted during the simulated air raids. Clara Bow, the era's biggest star, complained she had little to do in a film obsessed with men and machines, yet her presence made it a box office phenomenon. Wings stunned audiences into silence. When released, it was considered the most realistic depiction of war ever put to film. Veterans wept. Civilians gasped. It became the blueprint for every air combat movie to come. Nearly a century later, it still humbles modern pilots. Its courage was not in the story, but in the making. No CGI, no safety nets, just open skies and men who dared to fly for art instead of victory. For rookies, Wings is the genesis. The first time cinema looked upward and realized the sky could break your heart as easily as your bones. Number 1. Catch-22, 1970. Catch-22 isn't just a war film, it's the mirror that cracked the myth of heroism. Based on Joseph Heller's absurdist novel and directed by Mike Nichols, it tells of a U.S. bomber pilot named Yossarian trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare where surviving too many missions only earns him more. It's satire built on fear, laughter, and madness. The production was monumental. Filmed in Mexico with actual B-25 bombers, the crew spent months choreographing combat flights over dusty plains painted to resemble wartime Italy. The aerial cinematography was exquisite. 32 operational aircraft flew in complex formations that demanded military-level coordination. Nichols insisted on practical shots and real explosions. At one point, a mistimed detonation almost destroyed a camera plane. Critics were baffled. Some called it brilliant, others incomprehensible. But pilots understood its dark humor, the endless cycle of missions, the absurdity of paperwork, the numbness after each landing. For many aviators, it became a favorite because it said what few dared, that war in the sky is often a chess game played by ghosts. Behind the laughter, the film carried pain. The author, Joseph Heller, visited the set and was moved by how accurately Nichols visualized his dreamlike chaos. The actors, including Alan Arkin and Martin Sheen, flew in real bombers enduring the claustrophobia of cramped cockpits. Catch-22 endures as a philosophical flight manual. It teaches that courage isn't always noble, and sanity doesn't always win. For rookies, it's the final test, to learn that the enemy is not just outside the canopy but inside your own thoughts. The sky may be infinite, but reason rarely survives the climb. 15 Air War Films. 15 different altitudes of courage, fear, and faith. From the silence of wings to the insanity of Catch-22, they prove that flight is never just mechanics, it is meaning. Which of these films shaped your vision of the sky? Tell us below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep your eyes on the horizon.